Season 1 is here, and if you plan on making a Barbarian, you're going to want to know about this guide here today. I tested all of the skills, saw what was fun, saw what felt good, and in my personal opinion, what happened to feel the best, performed the best as well. So I'm here to give you that guide while you're leveling up in Season 1, assuming you've done the campaign already. This will still be viable for the campaign, but this is really tailored to people who already completed the campaign and are ready to just start blasting on day 1, like I know many of us are waiting for, so let's get it. What up team, it is MurderInc, and like I said, Season 1 is here. It's time to level that Barbarian. We're here to do damage, we're here to not struggle basic attacking throughout our entire leveling experience, so I have a build for you, and we are using Rend. And when you hear Rend, you might say, oh, Murder, please. Not that skill with the abysmal hitbox at such close range. Listen, I hate to say this, but the leveling guides we got going into the launch of the game were awful. I don't know how, I'm gonna cut them some slack. They only had beta. Most of them only had beta to make the leveling guides, but they did not do any of the builds justice. First of all, upheaval is terrible for leveling. I'm not sure who came to the conclusion that it was good, but it's just terrible for leveling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a build planner for this using a really cool new tool that you should absolutely start using as soon as possible. All of my builds are going to be on this. It's called mobalytics. There's a website, there's an app. It puts an in-game overlay while you're playing the game so you know exactly what to do next. It's just brilliant. So go ahead, check it out, download the app, and you will find my builds there. I'm going to be updating once Season 1 comes out, and once I, of course, get to the level to test them, but this is going to be the leveling build I'm going to use. You can follow me on Twitch. We'll have a good time for sure. But it's really important for this build specifically that you don't just follow the guide without listening to what I have to say about how to approach this, because it's not as simple as just following the guide, because you're going to be changing skills, not too often, but I'm going to say there are certain times you have to change skills, and I can't put that on the actual guide itself because it would make it look too sloppy. So the first thing I want to show you in game here is going to be, why did I pick what I picked? So if you look at Rend, why Rend is significantly superior, and you can see I have 5 additional skill points available. I'm not stupid. When you start the game, you're not going to have the full renown system unlocked, which means you're going to be down 5 skill points. So I've never included that in all of my testing. I made 7 level 50 Barbarians, and we tested them with different builds all the way up. I stopped at level 10, 15, 20. You kind of get to every 5 levels I stopped until I hit 50, and then I went to 60 on some builds that looked promising, and Rend just blew the rest out of the water. So why is Rend so good? It's because Furious Rend, you can get this straight out the gate here. So if we go back to mobalytics here, and you go to the skill tree, make sure leveling is turned on at all times. So just have leveling, the clicker checked, and you will see the process. So you put opponent lunging strike, enhanced lunging strike, Rend, enhanced Rend, Furious Rend. You will start with 5 points, assuming you completed your renown prerequisites before starting the season, and your Fury problems are already going to feel a billion times better than any other option here. The reason why nothing can compete with Rend, even up to level 50 and beyond, is because of crit strike, right? So if we look at our crit strike, let me just go to my stats very quickly here. Crit strike chance, 13.8%. The only ability that is not reliant on you dealing front-loaded damage out of this whole kit is going to be Rend. There's a case to be made about Whirlwind. The issue with Whirlwind is we don't have enough Fury to do this. And the most brilliant part about the build, which you'll see on the website, is we don't touch an ultimate ability and we don't touch a keystone at all. Until much later we take Gushing Wounds. But the fact that we don't even care about this and our damage is surprisingly still fine, all the way until you can get these points and you still skip them anyways, makes the build so strong here. So what I'm trying to talk about here is Furious Rend. Direct damage with Rend grants 4 Fury per enemy hit up to a maximum of 20. So you're getting 20 Fury every time you cast Rend, and Rend costs 35 Fury total, which is massive. What does that mean? You're not using Hammer the Ancients or Upheaval or Double Swing and spamming Lunging Strike just to cast these abilities 2 times, then waste another 6 seconds spamming it over and over again. The second point, like I said, we are not getting enough crit strike to take full advantage of Upheaval, Double Swing, or Hammer the Ancients. We're just not. So we're doing less damage for no reason, and it cannot compete. The other things you're going to see in the leveling guide, we'll go back to really quickly on mobalytics here. We go down here. We're going to take Ground Stomp as soon as possible. It will unlock because we'll have the points to. Why do we take Ground Stomp? It's an amazing defensive layer early on. It's a 3-second knockdown / stun. And eventually you get 40 Fury. This isn't currently updated, but that was a change in the most recent patch, which I just did a video on. And we now get 40 Fury. So this is going to be even better than my initial testing. And I was waiting and I said, maybe the patch is going to buff some of the other iterations I tested. And it didn't. It just made this version that much stronger here. So the final breakdown we're going to use is going to be Lunging Strike, Rend, Challenging Shout, Rallying Cry, Ground Stomp, and Steel Grasp. We get Steel Grasp incredibly early here. We're talking 16 points in, we're getting Steel Grasp. Why is that so good and strong? Because we start with 5. So what does that mean? We're using Steel Grasp, grouping everything up, using Ground Stomp, gaining Fury, hitting Rend, gaining more Fury, and we're not sitting there spamming Lunging Strike. The only, I guess, downside you can say for this build is Rend is a damage over time ability. So you're going to see from the gameplay that's playing throughout this that you fill up the bar with a bleed very quickly on any enemy. Any enemy you can think of. Bosses are a little bit slow, but it's really not that bad because I'm going to show you a, I guess, bossing build that you would in fact swap to. So the only real issue is going to be you're going to be kiting mobs around. But the thing is they're already going to be dead, so it doesn't really matter. It could be a little bit annoying having to go back and loot, but what you're sacrificing instead is you're gaining more survivability. You can farm harder content, even though it is going to be a little bit slower. And the return overall is you're going to level up faster. So this is huge, and this is why I love this so much. If you would like to, you can take Rupture. I have taken Rupture, and it works fine. The optimal thing to swap out for Rupture is going to be Ground Stomp. You are losing a defensive layer, and the Rupture cast is rather slow, because it is slow. Feels kind of clunky, but you are getting increased attack speed from it, and it was buffed pretty decently, so you can use it if you want, and you will instantly execute all of the mobs in front of you. But you will not struggle with elites, you will not struggle with any mobs, you won't struggle with range, which every other build does, by the way, because you have Steel Grasp. Now, vulnerable damage and the damage output of this build is far superior to others, because Steel Grasp applies vulnerable. It's the second point in, and this was changed to 3 seconds, which is nice. Then as soon as you slap them with Rend, it's a 5-second vulnerable window. And you have 2 charges of Steel Grasp. So you have permanent vulnerable uptime on all of the mobs, which is why they instantly fill the bleed bar of whatever you're hitting, and they're just dead. It's like crazy that Rend hasn't always been the best build from 1 to whatever when starting out, even in the original game, and why many people went Upheaval instead. So let's talk about bossing, because bossing is where things get a little bit more complex. So I'm going to do this in-game so I can use this instead here. What you're going to want to do is you actually don't need Rallying Cry for bosses. Why don't you need this for bosses? Because there isn't a ton of rage gain to be had here. You're just going to be swapping in Lunging Strike with Rend overall, and you would get rid of these 3 points here. We just have a standalone skill, and you're also going to get rid of Tactical Ground Stomp, which I can't get rid of fully. It is what it is. But we're going to be taking Death Blow instead. So now we're taking Death Blow. We want increased damage to bosses, of course, and we don't need the Berserking because we're going to get the Berserking from Steel Grasp. So we're just going to take Fighter Death Blow for a little bit more rage, and then we can put as many points as we want into Death Blow. We'll just put it at all the way to 5 out of 5. I do have 1 from the skills, so we'll keep that in mind as well. And I know I'm going into and dipping into the secondary points. If you need to take damage out of anywhere, you can take it out of Guttural Yell. You can take it out of Rend itself, because Rend, while it does good damage, Death Blow is going to be the hard hitter for the bosses. This is where you want to consider using an ultimate ability, because like I said, we took out Rallying Cry as well as Ground Stomp, or we should have at least. So since we're kind of bottlenecked at this point, you can put 2 points in Challenging Shout to fully remove from Ground Stomp here. Now we have our extra 2 points, and you can pick any ultimate you want. I would recommend Call the Ancients. Call the Ancients is very strong while leveling because you can cast it and then keep kiting and waiting for cooldowns. What cooldowns would you be waiting for? Really just Challenging Shout. This is an amazing amount of damage reduction, and that's what matters for this build for bosses. Your boss damage is going to be fine. You're going to get bleeds onto the target, but you need to be able to survive. So you pretty much want to invest into Death Blow. We'll put in 2 points here. You don't even need increased attack speed or increased damage here. You kind of just, the first skill matters the most. And I guess if you want to go all the way down to Supreme, you can if you have the points. This is what's going to matter the most. If you have the points, go ahead and go all the way down to Supreme Call the Ancients. But just the first point is going to be fine for bossing and Death Blow. So the whole playstyle for this in bosses is rend the target, use Death Blow until it's on cooldown, and then full invest into survivability. You want Guttural Yell. You want aggressive resistance, damage reduction while berserking. You want maxed out Challenging Shout. You can take Imposing Presence. Iron Skin's good as well. You're gonna have to find a slot to put this in for. This is pretty much if you don't take Call of the Ancients and you want to rely strictly on your Death Blow and Rend damage, which I've done and it's fine. It's personally up to you. If your gear isn't strong enough, you take the point out of Call of the Ancients and put it into Iron Skin for any boss fight. And you have to do this for every single boss fight. If you don't, it's kind of a player issue. A lot of people think they're going to make one build and that's going to be their build for everything. You can do that if you want to, but the gold cost, despite, I mean, obviously I have gold because it's the Eternal Realm, but the gold cost, you'll never run out of gold swapping talents like this because it's so cheap early on and you make enough gold to cover it. I did a test where, again, I logged in, noted how much gold I had, went through leveling as I normally would, swapped for every boss fight. I never was under the limit, and that kind of says everything you really need to know about this. So that's the swap I would make for bossing. Bossing aside, however, the next really important thing that everyone needs to know is always use one-handed weapons when you're starting the leveling process. It feels so clunky to use a two-handed weapon for pretty much any build when you're starting out under level 50. We'll just call it under level 50 because 50 was the campaign roundabout limit. So always use 2 one-handed weapons for Rend. Always use 2 one-handed weapons for Launching Strike. There's a case to be made, I guess, to take Endless Fury, but you really don't need the Fury gain. Like I said, the build, you will not believe how much Fury you end up having with this build and just the constant damage output where all you're going to care about in the end is surviving. That's it. I've even done some tests where I took points out of Rend and I was still fine because you overkill things up to 5 to 6 levels above you while leveling where the damage isn't the problem. The problem is you surviving. So bleeds OP in this game early on. The problem is that falls off later on, which is why the Paragon board that I have in mobalytics that you should follow to start with, it ends rather quickly after 3 boards, because at this point, I'll have other builds out, and I'm sure other people will as well, where you can pick and say, where do I want to commit to next? If you want to stick with Rend, there's going to be a Rend Paragon setup, and I have this set up in a way where it's not going to cost you a fortune of gold to reset Paragon boards. This starting board is very strong, but I don't think it's going to be optimal for when you're level 80, 90, getting to 100 if that's your goal in this game. There are going to be other Paragon boards you want first tier, but for the first 3, I'm happy with this. We get tons of armor, and survivability is huge, lots of crit damage, lots of vulnerable damage early on, and your damage is just going to skyrocket. You also have damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, and as I highlighted already, there's a big emphasis with this build on vulnerable damage. And even from the start here, we don't care about damage. Like I made that clear already, but I just want to say it again. We're going armor here, max life. We're not even giving the time of day to the right tree because we're overkilling trash. And for bosses, we have the specific bossing build. And I did mention that in the notes here, how it's a high damage leveling build. Fury cost isn't an issue, and there's going to be a link to this video, of course. As far as the aspects go, the build is surprisingly strong before aspects. On here, I used as many codex aspects as possible. What's a codex aspect? If you go in game and you hit Y if you're on the PC and go to Codex of Power, this is everything that's available to you by just completing a dungeon. So I used as many of these as possible that made sense. We don't have access to the seasonal ones yet, of course, but we will. And as of right now, I would say we're just going to stick with the ones I have on mobalytics. There are a few places like Smiting, Skullbreakers. I'm not sure which other ones. I know I'm pretty sure Ironblood's static. Accelerating, I believe, is something you have to get as well. So there are options for seasonal aspects that aren't currently on this list. Just swap it in with something that's on this list that you haven't had drop for you yet, because getting anything outside of the codex, you're not going to be getting early on for sure. So you can look at where these aspects drop from, look at the dungeons, incorporate them into whatever leveling guide you're going to follow. I'm not going to be making any leveling guide personally because I'm not going to follow one. I'm going to do what's fun, I'm going to do what's fast, and I don't really care about speed running to 50, 60, 70. I just want to have fun while playing. And I enjoyed this build, so I just felt like I'll share it with you guys, and it just happened to be the most efficient and fastest build of them all. But as far as me min-maxing every single side quest, chaining them to dungeons, I don't think I'm going to do that because it's just not me. I'm not, I guess, hardcore enough or whatever to play it. And there's no leaderboard, so why like do something that you don't think is fun to begin with? I don't know. That's just my personal take. Let me know what you guys are going to do. Are you guys going to race to hit these thresholds first for whatever reason, if that's fun for you? I get the appeal to speedrunning, but it's just not for me. So again, definitely check out mobalytics. I'll have a link to this in the pinned comment, of course, and you can download the app and use it as the overlay. So as far as how mobalytics works in-game, it's the tab key on PC and then Q to open up the build guide. And then if you want to get to the settings, of course, or you can just hit tab Q again to put it away, and then tab S for settings, and you will see the pop-up once again right here. So you can pretty much alter anything you want here and just have a good time. So you don't have to constantly go back and forth. You can just hit tab Q, see where you are in the leveling build, and then go on from there. So I wish you all luck in Season 1. I'm glad you're playing Barbarian. It's a class true and near to my heart that I enjoy, and I probably will enjoy for the remainder of this game. We'll see. We'll see. It's way too early. It's just Season 1. But if you enjoy this content, smash the like button, subscribe with the notification bell, and I will see you all in my next upload.